Alright, so your question is, sketch the graph of the function, where the function is, let's go ahead and underline it here, the function is y equals 1/2 cotangent of x divided by 2. It also tells you to use a graphing utility to verify your results, but we don't need that. Alright, so sketch the graph of the function, so that's all we care about. I've seen some students in other classes and in your classes do like this kind of chart thing. So let's go ahead and start off with making our unit circle. We will make it, here's a good spot. Alright, and obviously your unit circle doesn't need to be pretty, it just needs to be in a similar shape of a circle, because that's all we care about. Alright, it's really just like a visible helper, it doesn't need to be amazing. Alright, so we have that, and then we're also going to be graphing, so we will graph here. Alright, and it says to include 2 full periods. So that means when we have our unit circle here, you start at 0, go around to pi, that's half of a period, continue going around 2 pi, go around again, you're going to have 3 pi, so this point right here is pi and 3 pi, continue going around, and you're also going to have 4 pi. Alright, so 2 periods means you're going to go around the circle twice. So 0, all the way around to 2 pi, around again, back to 4 pi. Alright, so that means our coordinate plane over here is going to go all the way over to 4 pi. And halfway in between will be 2 pi. And a quarter of the way will be pi. So this is 1 pi, 2 pi, 3 pi. And these are going to be our major points along with 0 over here at the origin. Alright, so this is where we're going to be plotting. Now, the chart I was talking about, some students are kind of making this chart, so you start off with your x values, right? And to make this simple, we will go with, start with simply drawing 0, pi, 2 pi, and we'll do 3 pi. 4 pi will be exactly the same as 0 and 2 pi, because that's at the same coordinate. So, but we'll do these just so you can see that. Alright, so we'll do points at all 4 of these. Alright, and then we're going to have x, and have x divided by 2. So that'll be our next row down. After that we will have cosine. Then we will we'll figure out sine. Now these values here will be cosine of x over 2 and sine of x over 2. And then at the very end we will do 1/2 of cotangent. Alright, so let's go ahead and get started. So x equals 0, let's get a different color right here. X equals 0 starts here. This coordinate is x equals 1 and y is 0. So that means x over 2 of 0, we're going to have, that's just actually going to be 0 still. So x is 0, x over 2 is 0, so that means cosine of 0 is 1, because we get that from the x value here in our unit circle, and sine of 0 will be 0. Now cotangent, remember cotangent is equal to 1 over tangent, which is also equal to, you're just basically flipping tangent. Tangent is sine over cosine, but because we're flipping this, we want cosine over sine. Alright, so cosine divided by sine, there's a 0 on the bottom here. We're going to have 1 over 0. So that means 1/2 of cotangent of x over 2 is actually undefined. So that means right here at 0, we're going to have an asymptote. We're going to have some kind of asymptote here. Let's go ahead and just make this a solid line. Asymptote at 0. Alright, so now let's go ahead and do pi, x equals pi. So now x equals pi, we are over here. So now x equals pi, the coordinate is -1, comma 0. Now -1, we're looking for the x value. And when I say x value, I actually mean radians. So I should have clarified that. This is radians around the circle. Alright, so when I said x value of 0, that's actually our radian value, wherever we are at the point around the circle. So x equals 0 is actually the radian 0. And then radian pi, we're actually over here, but what we're doing is pi divided by 2 because we have x divided by 2. So this will actually be pi over 2, which is up here. Alright, so we have pi over 2. Now the cosine of pi over 2, this coordinate here is 0, 1. So that means our cosine of pi over 2 is 0. Our sine of pi over 2 is 1. Cotangent is cosine divided by sine, which gives us 0. Alright, so 2 pi, remember how I said this repeats, alright, so 2 pi, we're eventually going to get undefined, because at 0 we got undefined. So as we're going around, we'll see that this becomes undefined. So now 2 pi is our x value, or our radian value, and this is going to be 2 pi divided by 2, so this will simply be pi. So our coordinate pi that we're dealing with here inside of cosine and sine is -1, 0. So cosine of pi is -1, sine of pi is 0, and again we're going to have a number divided by 0, so here we get the undefined, -1 divided by 0. Alright, so now 3 pi, back around, actually 3 pi we're going to get a different value, so let's do that. 3 pi divided by 2 is going to be 3 pi over 2, which is down here at the bottom of the unit circle, and this will actually get a 0. Let's go ahead and work it out though. This point is going to be 0, -1. So that means cosine of 0, so cosine of 3 pi over 2 will give us 0, and sine of 3 pi over 2 will give us a -1. So this is going to be 0 divided by -1. So at 2 pi, when our radian value that we're plugging in at the very beginning is 2 pi, or our x value over here on our graph, 2 pi is, pi will be 0, so we're actually going to be crossing this point here on our graph. 2 pi is going to be an asymptote because it is undefined, so we can go ahead and draw our asymptote here. 3 pi is going to be 0. Let's go ahead and do 4 pi really quick. So 4 pi, we go back around, we're going to get the exact same values as 0, so we're going to be over here again. So that's going to be 4 pi divided by 2 will give us 2 pi, which is 2 pi like I said. Cosine of 2 pi is 1, sine of 2 pi is 0, and we're going to get 1 divided by 0, or undefined. So we're going to have another asymptote. Alright, so now let's go ahead and continue on with some points in between. So to really fill out this graph, we know right now that it's crossing right here at x equals pi and at x equals 3 pi. So what we want to do is find some points in between our asymptotes and our points that we already know. Alright, so let's go ahead and start over here, somewhere between 0 and pi. A nice point between 0 and pi would be right in the middle. It's really like the easiest thing to do. So let's go ahead and pick, let's get a different color here. Let's go ahead and pick pi over 2. Let's continue our graph. We're going to start with x equals pi over 2, which will be right here, pi divided by 2. Now pi divided by 2 is pi over 4, which is the same as pi over 2 times 1/2. Alright, so multiply these out. This is going to be pi over 4. Alright, so that'll leave us right here. So here's our little mark, pi over 4. Remember, this is pi over 4, 2 pi over 4, 3 pi over 4, and 4 pi over 4. Let's go ahead and do pi over 2. So so when we plug this in, pi divided by 2 is pi over 4. The cosine of pi over 4, if you remember from previous videos, we have this coordinate is √2 over 2, comma √2 over 2. So the cosine of pi over 2 is just √2 over 2, and the sine of pi over 4 is also √2 over 2. So √2 over 2 divided by √2 over 2, you'll notice these are the exact same numbers. So this would be like just dividing, y divided by y will always give you 1. So that means here at pi divided by 2, this coordinate up here is pi divided by 2, we get the value 1. So we can go ahead and plot this point right here. Alright, so now let's go ahead and start the next column. Again, we want something in between here. So something in between pi and pi over 2. And again, the best place to go is just right in the middle. So pi and pi over 2. This coordinate right here, this is pi over 4. Actually, we can count by half pi's. So this is going to be pi over 2, 2 pi over 2, 3 pi over 2. So now we're going to do the radian value of 3 pi over 2, because that gives us somewhere right here in between pi and 2 pi. So 3 pi over 2 divided by 2 is going to give us 3 pi over 4. Alright, so now cosine of 3 pi over 4 is right here. 3 pi over 4 is going to give us, this is 1 pi over 4, 2 pi over 4, and right here we have 3 pi over 4. So 3 pi over 4, this is going to be exactly the same coordinates, so we can just, draw a line across directly horizontal from this pi over 4. Remember, this makes like a box shape around here, but the other, pi over 4, as we count pi over 4, it's going to be pi over 4, 2 pi over 4, 3 pi over 4, 4 pi over 4, 5 pi over 4. You can draw these lines and make this box and they connect, and you're going to have exactly the same values. So this is root 2 over 2 also, except in this quadrant, the x value is negative and the y value is positive. Alright, so let me fix that plus sign. Alright, it's going to be positive. Alright, so now cosine of 3 pi over 4, because that's what's actually inside of here. That's what's inside of this, inside the parentheses of cotangent. We're going to have cosine of 3 pi over 4 is going to give us negative root 2 over 2, so negative root 2 divided by 2, and sine will give us positive root 2 over 2. Positive root 2 over 2. Now, again, these are the same numbers, so this would be similar to saying negative y divided by y. And the y's will cancel out, and all you're left with is negative 1. So over here at 3 pi over 4, sorry, 3 pi over 2, that's what this coordinate is here, 3 pi over 2, we have the value of negative 1. Alright, so this actually makes, we know that this is coming away from x equals 0 asymptotically, crosses through this point, crosses through the x-axis, crosses through this point, and approaches 2 pi asymptotically. So it will never actually touch this line. So it's going to make kind of this S shape. And now this is repeating. This whole thing is repeating. So that means that whatever happens in the first period, it'll be exactly the same thing in the second period. And that's kind of the whole point of these trigonometric functions. They are constantly repeating, and they repeat forever. So that makes them kind of easy to work with. So once you draw the first period, it's exactly the same thing. And if you want, you can go ahead and test me on that. You can go ahead and plug this in with a graphing utility and cheat, or you can just do it by hand. And you can continue this chart. You're going to look for a value between 2 pi and 3 pi, and then another value between 3 pi and 4 pi. And that's what you will plug into this chart, start off solving for x over 2. Alright, so you plug in your x, solve for x over 2. Now when you have that, that'll be cotangent of x over 2. So that's kind of what we're playing with in this column. Or actually, we're only playing with the x over 2 in this column. In this column, we are dealing with the cosine of x divided by 2. And in this row we're dealing with cosine of x over 2. And in this row, we're dealing with sine of x over 2. And in this very last part, oh, I made a mistake. I forgot about this 1/2. This is very important to come back and check your work, or else you make mistakes like me. So this is 1/2 of cotangent. So that means each of these are divided by 2. 1 divided by 2 and negative 1 divided by 2. So these points are actually slightly lower. So this is going to be 1/2 here, or 0.5. 0.5, and this is going to be negative 0.5. Alright, so that means our points that are actually crossing through are a little bit higher. So that means this will come down and come in like this. There we go. Alright, so sorry about that. Here, I'll go ahead and redraw what this should look like down here. Let's get a different color. Alright, so here is our... We're just going to draw a single period here. So this is going to be 2 pi. This will be 0. Halfway in the middle we will have pi. Right here we will have pi over 2. And here we will have 3 pi over 2. Alright, so like I said, everything else is the same. We're going to have an asymptote at x equals 0, an asymptote at 2 pi. Alright, so we knew that part. Now at pi, it's still equal to 0 because 0 divided by 2, these values here, 0 divided by 2 is still just 0. So it's still going to cross right here at x equals pi. And yes, I'm doing this in pink, don't laugh, I ran out of colors. Alright, so here we have x equals 0, y equals 0 at x equals pi. And then for these values here, we forgot to divide, I forgot to divide by 2. So that means our coordinates here are going to be 1/2 and -1/2. So here are our points. And again, same exact thing. We know these are coming away from, this line is coming away from x equals 0 asymptotically. Crosses through this point, crosses through the x-axis, crosses through this point, and approaches 2 pi asymptotically. So you're going to get this kind of like squiggly line. It's going to come down, it's going to look almost vertical from the top, and come down, cross through pi, and then approach 2 pi asymptotically. Alright, so if anything, we learned that it's important to go back and check your work. And especially for this 1/2 cotangent of x divided by 2. Alright, good luck on your homework, guys.